The man stood at the dealership gate, his clothes torn, his shoes split open, and his beard so wild it could have told stories of its own. He looked like someone who hadn't had a good meal in days, maybe weeks. The sun burned above him, reflecting off rows of polished silver and black Mercedes trucks that gleamed like trophies behind the glass wall. The salesman inside barely looked up from his coffee as the ragged man pressed his palm to the door and whispered, "I'll take 5 of those trucks." The room went silent for half a second. Then came the laughter. The kind of laughter that doesn't just mock, it crushes. Every man in a pressed shirt and shining wristwatch chuckled, exchanging smirks like schoolboys. 5 trucks? You mean 5 minutes, old man, someone joked. Another said, "Sir, this is a Mercedes dealership, not a charity." The ragged man's face stayed calm, almost too calm. He simply nodded, looked around the room once more, and said, "That's fine. I'll be back tomorrow." Then he walked away, leaving behind echoes of their laughter bouncing off the spotless tiles. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and that life can turn around when no one expects it, then make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. This story is going to stay with you long after it ends. The next morning, the same man returned. Same tattered clothes, same unkempt beard, same worn-out shoes. Only this time, the laughter came quicker. The guards didn't even let him step inside. "We told you yesterday, old man, this isn't a joke," said one of them. But the man smiled again, showing a quiet patience that felt strange in a world that had forgotten how to wait. "I said I'd be back," he murmured. "And I will keep coming back until you sell me those 5 trucks." Then he walked away again, day after day, the pattern repeated. He arrived at dawn, stood quietly by the glass doors, and asked for 5 trucks. The workers started placing bets on how long he'd keep coming. Some said a week, others said 2. One woman in the office, a junior clerk named Farah, felt a twinge of pity every time she saw him. She watched him from the window as he stood under the sun, sometimes clutching his stomach as though hunger had become a part of him. Why does he keep coming, she wondered. Doesn't he see they'll never take him seriously? But the ragged man saw something they didn't. What no one knew was that his name was Rafay, once a man who had owned a successful logistics company years ago, before life took everything away. A truck accident, one he was blamed for though it wasn't his fault, had taken not just his business but his family's faith, his savings, and his dignity. He'd spent the last few years working small jobs, saving every rupee, every coin, refusing to give up on the dream he once had to rebuild his company from the ashes. And though life had stripped him of everything that looked like success, it had left him with something far more dangerous, determination. One night, after his 10th rejection, he sat on the curb near the dealership, watching the flickering neon sign fade into the night. He whispered to himself, "They see my clothes, not my heart. They see my hunger, not my strength." His fingers clutched a small notebook filled with plans, routes, and the names of drivers who still believed in him. All he needed were the trucks. He wasn't asking for pity, he was offering business. But the world was too blind to look beyond his torn shirt. Then, one morning, something changed. A black S-Class Mercedes pulled up to the dealership, and out stepped a tall woman in a sharp navy suit. Her name was Sadia Khan, Regional Director of Mercedes Commercial Sales. She had come for a surprise audit and noticed the commotion at the gate, the guards trying to push the ragged man away again. Something about his calm eyes stopped her. "What's happening here?" she asked. When they told her, she frowned. "Let him in." The guards hesitated, but she insisted. Inside her office, Rafay stood quietly as she looked him over. "You've been coming here for almost 2 weeks, asking for trucks." "Why?" she asked. He took a deep breath and spoke softly, "Because I'm rebuilding what life destroyed. I lost everything, my company, my home, my reputation. But I've spent years saving and planning. I can't afford all 5 trucks now, but I've arranged partnerships, routes, and future payments. I came here because I believe in your brand. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for trust." There was silence. Sadia leaned back, her eyes narrowing, not in judgment, but in thought. "You have proof of what you're saying?" Rafay nodded and pulled out that same worn notebook, filled with every detail, clients, contracts, contacts, and even projected earnings. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The kind of plan only someone who had lived through fire could write. She went through it page by page, and by the end, something shifted in her expression. "You're either a dreamer," she said finally, "or the bravest man I've met." The next day, the same employees who had laughed stood in disbelief as Sadia herself accompanied the ragged man into the main office. The laughter died quickly. "Prepare the lease documents," she ordered. "Mr. Rafay will be taking 5 trucks on a long-term business plan with deferred payments." The manager protested, saying, "Ma'am, this man," but she silenced him with a look that could cut glass. "This man," she said, "is going to make us proud we trusted him." And he did it within 6 months. Rafay's trucks were running on major routes between Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, hauling goods faster and cheaper than larger companies could. His drivers, men like him who had once been overlooked and discarded, worked with pride, knowing their leader believed in them. Word spread quickly in the industry. The ragged man who bought 5 Mercedes trucks was building an empire. His business, Rafay Logistics, began winning contracts no one thought he could point one afternoon. The dealership that had once mocked him received an order request. It was from Rafay Logistics for 20 more trucks. The same manager who had laughed the loudest read the email twice, unable to believe it. When Rafay himself arrived to sign the deal, this time wearing a crisp white shirt and clean trousers, the staff stood awkwardly silent. But he didn't scold them, didn't even mention the past. He simply smiled, shook hands with each of them, and said, "Thank you for not believing in me back then. You gave me something to prove." Farah, the junior clerk who had once pitied him, had tears in her eyes as she watched him walk out, his convoy of brand-new Mercedes trucks gleaming behind him like symbols of redemption. She whispered to herself, "The world laughed at the wrong man." Years later, Rafay became known across the country not for his wealth, but for his kindness. He opened a fund to help small business owners get their first trucks, often saying, "No one should be laughed at for dreaming." Every dealership in the region now had a framed photo of him beside his trucks, a reminder that appearances deceive, and faith can rebuild anything. And on quiet nights, he'd still visit that same dealership gate, standing for a moment where his story began, whispering to the stars, "It was worth it."